The supply chain really is looking for long-term partnership. They're not looking to constantly have changes. Now, I do think that they will think about changes, maybe if an incumbent isn't doing the things they need to be doing or isn't being fair in their contracting. But long story short, most supply chain people want those partnerships because they know the value of what that can mean. Welcome to Selling to Healthcare. I'm Lisa Miller, and over 5 episodes, I'll be sharing insights from my 30-year career in healthcare sales. From building lasting partnerships to driving real results, I'll show you how putting service first can transform your approach. Whether you're new to the field or a seasoned pro, let's dive in and explore strategies that really work in this dynamic industry. Hello, this is episode 5 of Selling to Healthcare, and today's episode is selling to the supply chain and department leaders in healthcare. And this wraps up the series. So thank you, Lisa, for helping me through this Netflix series, which I was really excited to do. Our goal, though, in the future is actually interviewing actual C-suite clinicians, department leaders, and hearing what they like and what they want. But that's in the future. This does wrap up this 5-part series, but we are eventually going to add to interviews because I actually feel that leaders in the hospital want to engage, and sometimes it's best to hear from them themselves how they want to be engaged in all aspects. So it's going to be cool. I'm really looking forward to that. So I want to just start by saying that COVID really showed us that supply chain in particular, and of course, department leaders, but supply chain, how important, if not unequivocally vital, they are to the health system. And before COVID happened, like I used to say, they are a pillar to the organization. And so, while I do talk a lot about selling to the executive suite, this is so important, selling to supply chain, because they are foundational. So, we're going to talk a lot about them today and how they have P&L responsibility, how they have their own goals, and how they're of service all throughout the hospital. So they're very influential.
I think COVID literally taught the world what supply chain means.
Yeah.
I don't think people really understood until COVID happened what supply chain meant and the impact that it can have on all of our lives, not to mention just healthcare. So yeah, this is exciting. So why don't we start by talking about how the roles and responsibilities of supply chain and department leaders differ from other healthcare decision makers. So what makes supply chain and its leadership different?
Yeah. So number one, they are very much focused on operational efficiency and cost management, right? And it's really important. Why would an organization want to overpay on anything, right? And so you need exceptional leaders in supply chain to make sure that the goals of the organization are met. So there's operational efficiency. How can they serve the departments? And also, we want to make sure that this is competitive. We want to vet, we want to make sure that maybe our peers, what's their feedback? So that it's really important. They're focused on implementation and process optimization. And really key is they're going to be those internal collaborators with clinicians and physicians. So they play a very, very important role.
Right. How can salespeople effectively support the personal and professional goals of supply chain leaders?
Yeah. So if you think about it, again, we've mentioned this before, supply chain has their own metrics and goals and individual goals they have to keep. And some of that's around cost savings. So what do they have to achieve every year? Some of that's around alignment of initiatives. If they have a new EMR or any kind of integration, they're going to be very much aligned, and getting that through that technology integration through on time, on budget, and working well. That could be part of their way they get bonused, or they're part of their standards. And so that's important. I believe salespeople can really help with education and industry and insights. In fact, I think education now more than ever, helping supply chain advance their skills and capabilities. I think it's a big unmet need and a big opportunity for salespeople to come in and say, listen, we offer this kind of training, and as part of our solution, we're going to add that no charge. Or we want to sustain, but how do we develop them and develop those leaders as well? And I think the other aspect is the supply chain really is looking for long-term partnership. They're not looking to constantly have changes. Now, I do think that they will think about changes, maybe if an incumbent isn't doing the things they need to be doing or isn't being fair in their contracting. But long story short, most supply chain people want those partnerships because they know the value of what that can mean. I'll give you one example. When I was selling for Stryker, I had many accounts this happened, but one in particular where they knew that I would provide not just the solution, the technology, but it was the service. They knew they could rely on me if something, is reliable in urgent situations, important situations. So I would always get the first call, Lisa, do you have this product? Do you have this solution? Because they trusted me. They wanted a reason to buy more from me because they knew I was reliable. So I think they are looking for long-term partners, and they're looking also for their own career. How could they advance? And so what does that mean? Well, that means if they're successful and we're all helping them be successful, they're going to grow in their career. And that's what we're all looking for, I guess, to one degree or the other.
So I have a really simple question for you, for our listeners. Supply chain to me sounds like this big ambiguous term. So if you're trying to sell to supply chain, who's the buyer? Who's the decision maker that you should be targeting?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in some situations, the chief supply chain officer could be the VP of supply chain. It could be individual leads, like it could be, individual contractor leads. It could be the VP of reference lab, VP of pharmacy, VP of, support services. And also in that area, it could be, which I love, performance improvement. That's a great area because they're kind of oversight of a lot of different aspects. And I would also say like value analysis is important, right? That falls under supply chain equally as important. Or some of those titles like, data analytics. Those are some really good titles that you would be kind of selling into, or distribution could also be another title. So it just really depends where your solution falls into.
Okay. All right. So thank you for that, Lisa. That was helpful to understand who those people are in supply chain. Can you talk to us a little bit about what are maybe 2, 3 key ways the size of a hospital or healthcare system affects the authority and decision-making power of supply chain and the department leaders?
Sure. So, I think it really varies. In some ways, it's centralized or decentralized decision making. You could have a one or two hospital health system that everything flows into supply chain and it's very centralized. And I think you see a lot of hospitals trying to do that more and more, right? Like all departments, all services, all purchasing goes through supply chain. But in some of the larger health systems, that it may be only certain aspects, and then everything else is then decentralized to departments or maybe bigger groups. I just think you have to be aware of it. And I think that's my point. Like, depending on what you provide, there are applications to sell into supply chain, but they may not even have the authority. And now you've gone in, and it's really tough once you go in and they're like, okay, well, we'll find out for you and come back. Like, then now you've got to wait. They didn't have sun in their complete oversight. And whereas if you found out exactly where the oversight was, you could make a better entry decision. So I think that's could be also a miss, but I think it's really like you got to be aware of the organization. If they're centralized, decentralized, what does supply chain have oversight of? And if they don't have oversight of it, then the entry point is probably, of course, executive suite. If it's not, it could be that leader, that operational leader. I think it's the complexity and the collaboration, right? So again, just depending, I covered a little bit answering the first part, but depending on how complex it is or just how the system's organized. Like we have some health systems, I've seen some health systems that IT has oversight of biomed, right? That's an interesting kind of structure. Or, IT is responsible for helping in revenue cycle and operational decisions. So it just could be some complexity of how the organization is set up.
You shouldn't make assumptions that they're all the same.
Cannot make assumptions. Thank you. That's perfect. And then supply chain is going to be, they're going to want more, not that I'm going to say this, it's like collaboration, but they're going to want more and more and more buy-in. And I think you have to understand that, help them to get that buy-in. And of course, the part of their thinking and decision making is always around budget, cost control, or flexibility. Sometimes they maybe want one vendor, maybe they'll want two or three as backup. Like there's just so many dynamics, but I think those are good aspects, Lisa.
So you talked a little bit about buy-in. Can you give examples of tools and resources that salespeople can provide to help leaders gain internal buy-in for purchases?
Yeah, so there's like so many different ways depending on where you are. So I'm going to give like, back in my day when I was selling equipment in the OR, and that buy-in could be after the doctors have used the equipment, there are of course nurses in the room. And obviously the doctors are going to have the strong influence, but I would get surveys and I would have the nurses fill it out because they were in the room and they were circulating and I wanted their feedback. And so when I go to the materials manager or whoever in supply chain, I would show all the nurses who said, oh, this is so much easier to have a cordless drill, not have a drill that was connected to the wall. Like I would get there, oh, the doctor seemed happy. Obviously, I was getting the doctor. So something as simple as a survey, like you're in there doing evaluations, and if you don't have a survey, and I would say real paper survey, like I know everyone loves tech, I love tech, but now if you have a QR code and fill it out, what if they don't like fill it out in front of you? So something as simple as that, right? Because you can prove. So those are resources salespeople can do. A cost benefit analysis. I love ROI calculators. I love case studies. I love big success stories, transformational success stories. I love mini examples. The old, you can speak to a customer. I also love, oh, I gave this webinar. I think you should listen to it. Here's a great podcast. I actually had your peer. Oh, do you know Lisa Lauder? She's a peer. She's Chief Supply Chain Officer. She was on the podcast. She has some great insights. Send out the podcast. Demos are great. I love pilot programs. I think that's another great tool as well, a resource. I think, anything that's also going to de-risk the environment for them.
The other thing I would add that you haven't said that I have observed in you in all the years that we've worked together is having a high level of respect for everyone at the table.
Yeah.
I know that there have been times where I have, put my fear-based marketing cap on and you have pushed back and said, no, I won't communicate that way with my customers. And so I think, really having a strong sense of values in terms of being respectful and inclusive, just even in your communication with people, is a great way to get buy-in that people often overlook.
Yeah, so thank you for saying that. It's true. And I know I make people crazy with my languaging and how I think about it. They're like, wow, you're really particular. And I'm like, yeah. Or they say I'm really picky. And I say, no, I'm particular. So, but I even read something recently in a sales deck. Somebody said blind spot. And I thought, oh, can we change that? That wording. And it's not bad. Like, I think most people, can we just say it's a challenge? Like, I'm so careful because I'm putting myself in their shoes, or I've seen presentations where I'm watching and people in the room who are selling to are cringing or they're comfortable. And I'm like, oh, like, can we just show the respect? Can we careful with our languaging in all aspects to say, I understand where you're at. This isn't your fault. Like, you've been asked to do this in this environment. This isn't your fault. So why are we saying it's your fault? That drives me crazy. Like, can we just put ourselves in their shoes?
Yeah. And I mean, the whole reason that they're having a conversation with you is because they want change. They want to do things better. So by trying to shame them for how things are right now is definitely not going to get you buy-in. So,
but that happens. Speaking of LinkedIn, you mentioned it. Like, I see it all over LinkedIn, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, could you just have said that so differently? Like, be empathetic, be respectful, be thankful that someone's inviting you to the table to help them with their problem.
Yeah.
Be humbled.
Yeah. It's true.
I appreciate you bringing that up.
All right. I have two more questions for you.
Okay.
The first one is, what are some common challenges that supply chain and department leaders face, and how can salespeople position their offerings to address these challenges?
I think cost containment and budget constraints straight out, right? They're facing stricter and stricter budget constraints that's just becoming tighter and tighter. And those are the walls and the places they have to remain into. They can't fall outside. There's no, well, maybe I can stretch this, or usually we have a little extra. It's really very tight now. I think a big one is, you mentioned it earlier today, supply chain disruptions and that, the reliability. So there's a lot of stock outs. They've got to make alternative decisions. Those alternative decisions now have a downstream impact, because if this tubing that the nursing on the floors have used, and now they have to get a different tubing, and that tubing has a little different connector. And what does that mean for them? Like and sometimes the connector doesn't work, so you got to buy something else to make the connector work. Like, it's not as simple. It's very, it's supply chain disruptions are really a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always about like clinical needs, right? They want to serve, they're there to serve the clinicians. So it's always this, okay, well, are the clinicians' needs, because they're serving the patient, we really have to hear them and listen to them. Now the balance is it become, you're like, oh, it's constant, where it's almost excessive. And because they've seen the repercussions of not putting guardrails, and those repercussions are items that are only used once, and they bought a whole bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They have 3 of the same kind of technology, and 2 of those are sitting in a back room. Like, we have to realize that sometimes their pushback is because of real problems and other problems it's created. So you really have to balance those clinical needs, the operational efficiencies, and what they want to do to help. They want to help. That's their goal, is to serve departments. They are an internal department to serve others so that they can serve patient care. So I think those are the major ones.
All right. So on our last episode, you told me to remind you about anticipating vendors or competitors. So can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I totally forgot.
I didn't.
Yeah. So, like, if you're a vendor or supplier and you're in a competitive situation, and that could be RFPs, and, like, some hospitals use them more than others, and some of them are informal. But listen, here's a way that you can think about your competitors in a positive way, which I'm always about doing this in a positive way. If you have uniqueness that nobody has, or a combination of uniqueness, so you may all be similar in 8 areas, but there's 2 areas, and if you combine them together, you're 100% unique. A lot of RFPs, sometimes the vendors are writing them, right? Like, and like, oh, I know this vendor, they're writing for it. Okay, so it gives you a glimpse into the hospital's leaning towards. But if you could do that same strategy in a real, authentic way, like in an honest way, say, while you're writing the RFP, you could really say, remember, these are the 3 things you need to consider. And if you don't consider them, like, these are going to have some of the challenges. And April Dunford kind of talks a lot about that, of course. But for instance, if you don't consider that by adding technology that provides a way for the patient to provide feedback in real time before they leave the hospital, and that their family members can help, then you're going to have, that's going to be an issue, because you're going to have a lower response rate. And so now they're like, does our current provider do all 4 things? And they're going to go, ooh, we have to rethink that. And so now you may have just elevated yourself to like now being the number 1, number 2. But remember, be strategic in how you reply to RFPs. Be strategic on how you message in your presentations, because if you can do things no one else can do, or if you're a combination of them, and now you can explain why, if they don't do things, this is a missed opportunity. Now you've put it in their head like, oh, wait a minute, I never thought of that.
It's the positioning.
It has to be authentic. It has to be real. It's not fear-based. It's, you're informing. You're giving insights like, this is why we did this. So like, just remember, if you know your competitor doesn't do something, don't say your competitor doesn't do it. Say, these are important for success. These 3 things, these 4 things are important for success. And if you don't have those things, then these are kind of the second order consequences.
Right. You're planting seeds of doubt, or you're making them look deeper at your competitors in the RFP by virtue of doing that.
Yeah. Or even in your presentations or how you speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so I think it's a great strategy, and there's a lot more other nuances to it. So Lisa, this has been really wonderful over the last 5 episodes to talk about selling into healthcare. We've come the full circle of everything from the industry, different entry points to the C-suite, physicians, supply chain and leaders, and covered it all. And I think the reason why I wanted to do this is because I know as a person that's sold in healthcare for so many years, and every entry point, I have been very passionate and have 100% known what I was selling or serving would help. And I feel like there's a lot of companies there that really, they're in the same position and they really want to be able to share their message, their voice, their passion, and they struggle. And, my goal here was to provide some insights and I think a lot of guidance and to help them do that because their solutions will change healthcare, will help hospitals serve their mission, they will help everybody. And, so I'm hopeful that people listening get a lot of value from this conversation.
Oh, I'm sure they will. You provided a lot of really, really, really great information. I know you can't teach somebody everything you know on 5 episodes, but this was a great start. Thank you for sharing everything that you have learned over almost 3 decades of selling to healthcare.
Yeah, it's been that. And in a couple of days, it'll be a little longer because I'm celebrating a birthday. So yeah, but anyway, Lisa, thank you for being a part of the show. And as always, been an amazing producer and somebody I could talk with who really does have a lot of insights and has seen a lot of the evolution. So if you're wanting to know how to get a hold of me or to learn more, to talk about ways that I can help you selling to healthcare, you can reach me at lisatmiller.com. All my information is there. I'm also on LinkedIn. And, and if you'd like to give some feedback, we are thinking about other ways to add to the podcast. So please let me know what you thought and the information I can provide.
Yeah, let us know what you'd like to hear next.
Yeah. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me on Selling to Healthcare. I hope you've gained some valuable insights today that you can apply to your own sales strategy. Remember, in healthcare sales, service always comes first. Join me next time as we continue to explore how to create meaningful partnerships and drive change in this complex field. Until then, keep focusing on service and watch your impact grow. And you can reach me at lisatmiller.com.